A poet and Giller Prize-winning novelist, Ian Williams's words explore the inner workings of life, family, love. But though his life's work is literature, again and again he finds himself drawn into the political. His new book explains. It's called Disorientation, Being Black in the World, and it's already been shortlisted for the 2021 Hilary Weston Writers Trust Prize for Nonfiction. Ian Williams is an associate professor of English at the University of Toronto and joins us now from the provincial capital. Hi, Ian. It's so nice to meet you.
Hi, you too, Nam. Thanks for having me.
I really enjoyed this book, and I don't know, if you were here, you could see how marked up it is. Yeah, congratulations on a great book. The title of the book is Disorientation. What did you mean by that?
So disorientation for me is the response that racialized people have to random or unprovoked reminders of our race. So we're going about our business, just doing our thing, and then someone interrupts our life to tell us about someone they know who likes reggae, or to ask where you're from, or some other kind of indication that says you are other, right? In this moment, you are a black subject, and you are no longer the guy just trying to buy a shirt at H&M. Yeah, so that's disorientation. And I guess the second part to that, Nam, is that the recovery of that, from that disorientation, also burns up so much mental energy for people of color.
I think some people might hear that and say, so what? It's just maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe the person is complimenting you because you remind them of Michael Jordan, whatever it is. But what does it do to the person who's getting that message?
Right. Yeah, I don't know about people's intentions. I don't read hearts or anything like that for a living. But I know its effect on me to snap me out of the task that I'm doing and then to refocus. People say this about the internet too, right? Like, you're doing one thing, you get sidetracked, and it takes, 15 minutes to get back on track? Now imagine that in like human terms. You're trying to focus on something or trying to do your job. You get snapped out of it. And how much mental energy do you burn up on your commute back? Or, when you could be having really sort of engaged moments with your family, processing the day's events through a racial lens.
Why write a book of essays in this particular time on this subject?
Yeah, last year when I began, I was living in Vancouver at the time. There were wildfires. There was a pandemic really starting to take hold here in North America. And of course, the justice movements that started in the US and spread around the world. And I put aside the novel that I was working on in order to write this book. It had a kind of urgency to it. I turned 40 a few years ago. And to be honest with you, I was kind of confused internally. There was a lot of noise that was happening externally.
Confused about what?
Confused about how this world can still exist, although we all know better, right? I mean, the social system can still exist and the justice system can still propagate injustices, although we all know better. And all of the noise that I was hearing around me was kind of similar to the noise inside of me. So I decided, Ian, there's no safety on shore, right? There's no safety trying to avoid this kind of conversation. You need to figure out what you think, and you need to understand how this world is working, because it's affecting you and breaking you down on a daily basis. And so that's the urgency and the impetus behind this book, Nam.
You said that you were avoiding it, and you write, I know a fair bit, but never enough to seize authority. My dissatisfaction with my knowledge, coupled with my tepid emotions, occasionally nauseates me. Would I not be a better human if I were informed and angry? Then I could be righteous. I should be vocal, more than vocal, loud. I have received the message that to be Black these days is to be perpetually outraged and distressed, fed up, tired. To be anything apart from that is treacherous and out of touch. Is that what you mean?
Wow. Yeah. So I admire activists. I admire people who are very vocal, and I admire those people who are on the front lines, doing work in our courts and our civil systems. But not all of us have the fortitude or temperament to do that kind of racial work. And so the fact that a Black person in a moment of injustice is quiet doesn't mean that that Black person does not care or is not necessarily engaged. there are features of personality too that determine how we respond to tragedy. Some of us get sad, some of us just drink ourselves into forgetfulness, right? And what I wanted to do in that quotation is recognize what's expected of us and then give people of color options or ways to be themselves still, right? That we don't have to sacrifice ourselves to some kind of single universal idea of what blackness is or does. We can care and we can further progress in our own ways.
You know, you say in the book that you are apolitical, and it's something that whenever anyone has said they're apolitical, I've kind of looked at them kind of sideways, like, what do you mean by that? Everything is political. So in a way, when reading that, to me, kind of challenged how I view things. Is it even possible to be apolitical at a time when just being who you are is a political act?
Right, right. So it's one of these words that unfortunately these days has become charged and loaded and abused, so much so that I think within a few years it's just going to empty out of meaning altogether, right? We saw this a little bit with what is feminism anymore, right? And I feel, what is empathy? Why people are throwing around these words, and to a more glib extent, what does it awesome mean anymore? I think political, I'm never quite sure what people mean by that, but the dominant way of sort of using it in society these days is, well, in two ways, right? There's sort of political movements and politics, right? But there's also the sense of it being a kind of cause that's aligned already with a position, right? So to be political is to have like left-leaning tendencies, which, you know, doesn't bother me or anything, but to have your position predetermined as the basis of the conversation, I have a little bit of a problem with. And some of us don't live our lives with that as the dominant lens. What if I went through and I said everything is art, right? Everything is a work or an attempt at artistic beauty. And so I think the people who say everything is political, important, because it sensitizes us to a kind of slice of life. But then there are writers and artists and other people who say everything is art, and how beautiful are you living your life and what are you doing with it? So, yeah, not to dispute you, Nam, right? But I hope you understand what I mean by
I
it.
totally understand it, and I think I think a lot of people, we're talking about politics. The election in Canada happened, and I think we saw this a lot in the American election. And they were doing the postmortem of who voted for President Trump, and it turns out Black people indeed voted for President Trump, and some people couldn't believe that. I kind of understood that because Black people are not a monolith, and maybe some people voted for him because they see themselves as American first.
Yeah, and you know, it's always hard in those moments. You say it, I'm like, how and why, and all of that, which betrays that I, in fact, do have like political commitments, right? I do, and you know, we hope that people share them with us, but also to give people the right to have their own. And so there are Black Trump supporters. I'd be curious to know, like, what are they thinking, like, genuinely, right? Like, without being pejorative or without being condescending or anything. Like, what are they seeing that I'm not quite getting?
It could be taxes, right? But that's another conversation for another day. But I want to go back into the book again, and you write, I can no more stop the disorienting effects of such events than I can opt out of weather or grammar. It's not that I find race in everything, but that race finds me. How does race find you?
Yeah, right. It seems to, it's inescapable, right? So I could be doing something pretty innocuous, like stepping into an elevator, and the body language of the woman in the elevator tightens. And someone would say, is that a racial act or whatever? And I would say, yes, because I've seen that before, and I can layer that on top of my past experiences. I open my Twitter feed, it's all there. You could argue and say, hey, that's self-selecting. You choose who you follow and all of that, right? So it's hard to explain to a doubtful audience that like I'm not pursuing race. I really am not, right? But if I just want to live with a reasonable degree of openness, the messages that I receive from the world are in fact racially inflected, right? Persistently racially inflected.
What effect does that have when, because I guess when it comes to racism or bigotry, some of it is very, it's out there. Like but even with George Floyd when he was murdered, we saw the video and you saw people commenting online. Well, he didn't follow orders, or he was making all these I guess excusing the behavior of the police officer instead of seeing the humanity of Mr. Floyd. What effect does that have on a person when you always have to feel like you're defending yourself as if your word is not your bond?
Yeah, it's so exhausting to keep proving yourself, right? And we know this for, like, you step into a grad school class and you're like constantly asked to defend your point of view and defend your point of view. And at some point you just kind of want to live and be trusted. But I think when people constantly ask us for proof of racism, the underlying presumption there is that, or assumption there is that we cannot be trusted to process the world. Right? That what we think has to be corroborated, that we are not sophisticated enough to have the apparatus to know what's going on. And that kind of doubt can really sort of do damage on you long term, because it can mean that as I process the world myself, it's not just a healthy skepticism that I greet it with, but with all of these other messages of, Ian, your perceptive apparatus is flawed somehow, right? You are somehow damaged. You don't know what is going on here. This objectively is not a problem. You are overly sensitive. And all of those messages that sort of bombard people of color need to be like put in their proper place. And no, you know what you're seeing. You know what you're feeling as a person of color. It cannot be proven, I think I say in the book. Sometimes it is just known. And what's going on in those moments is that your interlocutor, the person that you're speaking with, does not have that lived experience to know what it feels like intuitively. We've experienced it so much that it's gone to the level of intuition or gut, to know what it feels like in your gut to be discriminated against.
You write this story about an experience your friend went through with a police officer, and this line just sticks out in my head. You write, humiliation like shame doesn't need an audience.
Right.
Which was so incredibly powerful. The dynamics of that, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's this kind of external proving to people, right? To sort of piggyback on what you asked before just now, this need to prove to others, but also this kind of internalized audience that we have them in our heads. And so if something happens at work, I've worked in very good places the last few years. If something happens at work and I need to explain that, I run through all of those motions internally first. Like, how would a white person see this? What might a white person what's their frame of knowledge coming into this conversation? How can I expand their frame of knowledge so that they can see what I'm seeing? But my humiliation is private and my own, and the countless kinds of indignities I have working, sort of coming into contact with service people, or just in the daily circuit of my life, those indignities remain private and embarrassing to share, although I do share some of them in the book. And frankly, I don't think I should have to parade the evidence of my life forward for people to trust and believe me. I feel like as a human being, I should have a basic and default kind of level of trustworthiness.
When you say that the embarrassed part, I've experienced microaggressions, and I've found myself in situations where other people have caused me harm. I haven't, just me being me, and I've felt embarrassed by it, humiliated even. But why is the person who is, I don't like using the word victim, but why is it that you're feeling embarrassed and you're holding that shame in private?
Right. Isn't that one of the bizarre things of racism, right? That you could be abused and exploited, and many abused people feel this too, right? That the abuse is somehow something to do with you. And maybe if I had done something differently. So the fallout of disorientation is that kind of mental repair work to repair myself psychically afterwards, involves asking those questions. Should I have done something differently? Should I have smiled more? Should I have worn a different shirt? When I entered the elevator, should I have acknowledged the person there? All these things. Is my hair too long? Is my hair threatening? What's going on in those moments? And that kind of after processing, that post-processing, I don't think white people go through their lives constantly revisiting situations through those racial lenses. We revisit situations in all the other ways too, right? I said something stupid at work, or I'm feeling tired and maybe whatever, right? We have all these other things that we're processing, and then there's that filter of race. What happened racially in that dynamic?
You say that you don't think that white people go through that.
Mm,
You write this story about this horrible incident that your niece went through.
mm,
She's multi-ethnic, and you write about the Black Epiphany. But white people, while white people might not go through that, I think you write about how there is an understanding of using certain words or doing certain
mm,
things to, say, Black people, where they
mm,
know that they're in power. Can you tell us
mhm,
about what happened to your
mhm.
niece?
Yeah, so I talked about the time my niece was called the N-word for the first time. She was still in elementary school, quite young. And like
She was
that moment
10.
of racial, yeah, she was 10, right? That's what, grade 5? And so that racial awareness of suddenly someone pulling a card out that you hadn't seen before and levying it on you. The white girl who did it clearly knew that this word had power, and she deployed it at the right time and knocked my niece off balance. Black people come into a kind of racial awareness, and I think a white person could go their entire lives without coming into a racial awareness. That's personal. I don't mean like an understanding of, black exists and injustice exists and all of that, but of the ways that their whiteness grants privilege and affords them, you know, ease to move through life. So that kind of awareness, it would be great if white people had moments of discomfort and disorientation, if they had a real sort of one-on-one chance to process what it feels like, being knocked down by surprise, and then having to reconstitute your identity in racial terms. Um, and you know what, Nam? Sometimes it does happen to white folks, infrequently, right? If you push a white person and ask, um, no, where are you really from? You, not me, you, where are you from? And they go back beyond Canada and they say, I'm from Bulgaria and my mom's from Ukraine. Um, and then something in them is able to understand what an immigrant's experience is like. The difference, though, is that they can tuck that away permanently. They never have to deploy that. They never have to even mention that unless someone pushes, because whiteness embraces them in a way that, like, humanity still tries to hold black people at arm's length.
Well, you write that race originates in the white imagination. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I think people generally think that race is this kind of black issue, right? That black people feel it, we are affected by it, and we're the ones who will find solutions to it and tell people what to do about it, right? Tell us we'll tell you what we need, and then you can do it or not do it. But this is not a problem we created, and so the burden of like solving this problem is like unfairly placed on us for that obvious reason, and unfairly placed on us too because we're in a racial dynamic. Um, and there are white people who are complicitly participating in this and also have a responsibility. And so they too need to participate in the resolution of this. So if a white person has constructed my life thousands of years ago, constructed what I mean and how much I'm worth and what I can do and think and whether I will be trusted or not, I think it behooves a white person too to figure out how to undo some of that.
How do you go about undoing that? Because it seems as if we get heads are, you know, you go through the day, you have microaggressions. I've come to the point where I just don't even acknowledge certain microaggressions.
Right.
And then you have, when you do talk about this stuff, there is this pushback. No, this doesn't exist. And
Mm.
someone might use a quote from Dr. King. And then you just end up being at a stalemate. So
Right.
how do we get to the point of moving forward and actually
Right.
acknowledging this large elephant in the room?
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm not sure how constructive anger is and all of that. I believe it starts with those kinds of kitchen table conversations. about, okay, what was it like from the Ukraine and Belarus or wherever. It begins on that kind of one-on-one personal level. And I'm speaking in my own skin, okay? I'm not speaking for the race or anything like that. Um, I believe that where progress can be had is in like on an individual level. To first of all, like explore and identify those kinds of biases and thinking, and then to kind of deal with them. I don't know if we can imagine sort of a future time that is like raceless completely and completely just. I think like civil and political structures are just too complex and too dependent on inequity for that to happen in our lifetimes. But I do think our relations can be more humane on this one-to-one level, that the microaggression rate, whoever's monitoring that, should decrease just through these kinds of conversations. And then eventually enough of that. I think about it as a kind of trickle-up movement rather than a trickle-down Republican thing. With enough kindness and compassion, we can trickle upward towards systemic change.
We're in 2021 and we're still having the first of, we see that happening in the States with Kamala Harris making history.
Right.
You know, you write about being the only, the first. How does that affect you when you are walking into these rooms on a yearly basis? Like your partner at one point in one of the essays that you write makes fun of you and says, because you keep a diary of how many Black people I saw today.
Right.
But how does that affect you on a daily basis?
Right. My diary, Ian's diary of comforts, right?
Yeah.
Ian's book of comforts. Every time I saw a Black person. Yeah, so it's a day-to-day basis, but it's been happening since like high school and university, right? If you're in predominantly white spaces throughout your life, you get to be shaped according to certain preferences and impressions about like what you should be. But I'll liken it to this, Nam, here. I think we are used to it. Black people, we often occupy spaces that are predominantly white, right? And so we don't even bat an eye anymore at this. But if I were to ask a white person to do the same, I've said, I'm going to displace you here from your comfortable life. I'm going to drop you in Tokyo, or I'm going to drop you in Nigeria, and you're going to be the only white person in just moving through your life. You're going to buy groceries, you're going to go to your job, you're going to do all the things you normally do. And tell me how you feel. And suddenly they will be aware of their whiteness in a way they have never been aware of it before. That kind of hypervisibility will do its work in that situation. And you know what? I would go further and say that most white people in that situation would opt out, would find a way out of it. Unless they are being worshipped, right? Unless like their whiteness carries some kind of advantage, and then they'll stay and play God. But given the chance of being the only and the exceptional, constantly reminded of their whiteness day after day, I think they would avoid that situation or get out of it somehow. As Black folks, as people of color, we don't have that option.
Thank you so much for writing this book. I wish we had more time. I'll end on this note. Despite all of that, you write, your obligations to the world don't stop despite its hostility to you, and we keep moving forward, right?
Thanks for that, Nam.
And congratulations on being inducted into the Brampton Arts Walk of Fame as well. Thanks so much, Ian. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.